Okay, so this is part 2 of 2. Yeah, all of my cameras, and they all suck. Because I know the battery didn't run down on that camera. It's just that I have to tape the battery compartment, and it's not making a good connection, so it keeps saying low battery, but it's not low battery. Okay, so anyway, so this is part 2. Okay, so anyway, so when the black guy, the subordinate of the white woman, superior, when he was standing in the corner, over in the back of the facility to the right, in the corner with all white outfit on, he was just kind of like, "You think you'll like working here?" And in my head, I was just like, like, I didn't really know, I didn't think I would, but I didn't tell him that. And so then, where this number 5 comes in is that, so towards the end of the experience, towards the entrance in the back of the facility or front of the facility, whichever way it was, the entrance was in the back or the front. I'm not sure what was really the back or the front, but she was, at the back. We'll pretend like he was at the front of the facility, and at the back of the facility, that's where the parking lot was, and that's where I kept walking out at least 3 times because I knew I didn't really want to work there. But anyway, she at the end of the experience, she was at the back of the facility with me, and then she's like, "Okay, well, just go around and pick your little area that of the residents that you want to work with. All I had to do was just pick." Apparently, I was only going to have a workload of 2 residents, and over to the right, they were all over to the right, all the way to the back of the wall, and then all the way to the right part of the facility. And like I say, only the beds. There weren't any resident beds in the middle of the facility. They all just were all up against the wall and little sections. So like each little compartment of 2 beds, was like numbered. Like there would be like a number 5 or like a number 3 or whatever. And for whatever reason, I was going to pick like number 5 because I knew that those residents were easy residents to deal with and watch. Some of the residents were more complicated and hard to deal with. And so if I decided to work there, I was going to pick number 5. And so she was asking me, okay, well, which compartment of resident beds do you want to work with? And I was going to tell her, like number 5. And that was over at the right part of the facility when we were standing in the back. Me and her were standing in the back, and over to the left, that was like, it was like number 5 I was going to pick. The 2 little sections of beds, resident beds, and there was just like 2 patients per little section. So like I say, apparently I only had to watch, if I decided to work there permanently or whatever, I only had to watch 2 residents. But the only people that were in the facility was just me, her, the black guy. There wasn't any other employees except for the 3 or 4 or 5 cooks that I saw cooking. But the food looked nasty. And so anyway, that's where that number 5 comes in. That's why I put number 5. And but like I say, like at least 3 times I kept walking out. I kept walking out the door. Like my car was just parked right there, like 12 feet away from the building. And I just kept, walking out. And then I ended up back inside the facility because I kept thinking about, leaving because I didn't really think I wanted to work there. Or at least not any more than 1 time per week or whatever. And, okay, now here's where the kind of good part comes in and the bad part comes in. If it wasn't for this part, I probably wouldn't be talking about it. But it was kind of significant. Okay, so I talked about the one 13-year-old resident that had no eyes. And the zombie, the reptilian that posed as a zombie in 3D bobbing down the street, he had no eyes. He came in physical form in 3D in 2014, and I know he's the one that gave me this experience. It's kind of obvious because he put this 13-year-old in the experience with no eyes. Nothing. There wasn't any eyes. There wasn't, like, nothing. And so anyway, here's actually, with this part of the experience would have been just right before the end of the experience. Just right before the end of the experience, where the female, the superior, asks me, after she already did all the orientation stuff, and after I already walked around for hours and hours looking at the facility, trying to decide if I was going to work there, like right after that, right before that, this part happened. After she asks me, what section do I want to work with? And like I say, I was only going to be working with like two residents, because there was numbers, like numbers per every little section, and each section was only one to two beds. So it's not like I had a lot of residents that I was going to have to work with. Okay, so just not long before, the end of the experience, where she asked me what section I want to work with, this happened. And at this time, I was in, I guess you could call it, the front. I'll pretend like that is where I saw the black guy. I'll pretend like that's the front of the building. In the back of the building, I'll pretend like that was the back of the building. And that's where she always was at. And the front of the building, over in the right corner, that's where he popped up. He showed himself, and he was like her subordinate. And okay, so I was at the front of the facility, where there were beds all along the back wall, or front of the wall, whatever. Well, still back wall, because all the beds there was no beds in the middle. It was just like shelves of like food and stuff in the middle of the warehouse. But it wasn't a warehouse. It was just a warehouse that was converted into a mental retardation facility. It was a mental retardation facility for residents. And they all were female residents, as far as I remember. I don't remember seeing any males. Okay, so anyway, which in real life, it's really the opposite. There's way more men that are born retarded than females. Everybody knows that. Okay, so here's the kind of bad part and good part. Okay, and I know now, it didn't take me long to realize this, but the alien was mocking this movie that I just watched a couple weeks ago. And it was called The Doll. As far as I remember, it was just called The Doll. D-O-L-L. The Doll? Yeah, it was very generic name. Yeah, it was called The Doll, as far as I remember. It was on Netflix. D-O-L-L. I think it was under horror. I'm not sure. It was either under horror or drama or whatever. I just saw it just pop up at me, and I thought, well, that looks kind of good. I knew it was going to be creepy, and it was kind of neat that they were in that big old England mansion or whatever. But yeah, so it was called The Doll. And one part in The Doll, in that movie, oh crap, I can't remember that psycho man. Oh, I think he does use a bat. Does he use a bat? I can't remember. I think he did use a bat. He used a bat to knock the doll in the head, and he knocked his head off. And the porcelain head came rolling on the floor. Okay, and this experience, well, it's kind of a bad part of the experience, but under my experience, like I say, this was the part just not long before the end of the experience. It happened not long before the end of the experience, where she asked me, what area I want to work with. Okay, so then, like I said, I'm in the front of the facility, where the black guy popped up at me, and then all of a sudden I see. It would have had to have been him, but I'm not 100% positive, because those were the only two people in the facility. It was just them two and me, and like the 3 or 4 cooks. But I can't remember if I actually saw the black guy, beat up the kid, but it would have had to have been him, because there's nobody else in the facility. But at first he seemed, nice. He didn't seem mean or anything. Okay, so anyway, so this is what I saw. One of the residents obviously was being bad and unruly. So he was like, I was like, looking at this whole scenario where he was beating up this kid. He was beating up the kid, but there wasn't any gore or anything. And he was like, just beating him up, spanking him or whatever. Or her, I mean. But I can't remember if he actually used a bat. But he did not use his hands. He used something to beat on this I would say the kid was probably no older than, 10 or 11. And anyway, so this is kind of the bad part, but her head just came rolling off onto the floor. Just like bump, bump, bump. Almost like it was a doll head. There was no gore or anything like that. If the aliens really wanted to, they could make gore. Well, that's when you're really dealing with a mean one, if they put gore and shit in it and your experiences. But some of them, they know that would be pretty mean to do that. So there was like no gore or anything like that, but he was beating on the kid because the kid was being unruly and stuff. And he was just when I was watching this scene, he was just we were just standing just 10 feet, or not even 10 feet, maybe just 8 feet from the wall, because this whole facility was just one big square. And so he was like leaning down, beating on the kid, and I can't remember if he was using a bat, but I know he wasn't just using his hands. He was using something. And the head just totally became decapitated and just like bam, 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 just bounced and rolled onto the floor. But it was like a doll head. There was no gore, no blood or anything like that. It was just like a doll head. And it wasn't realistic, so to speak. The beating on the kid part, that was kind of realistic. You know what I mean? That looked kind of real and everything. But when the head came rolling onto the head was decapitated and rolled onto the floor, that wasn't like realistic. There was no gore or anything like that. And I know, once I woke up and everything, I knew that the alien had copied what I saw in that movie, The Doll, because that mean bipolar guy, I knew the doll was going to kill him, and he did. He killed that bipolar guy in that movie. And I think in the movie he did use a bat, I think. Or no, I can't remember. It was either a golf club or a bat. And this, and under my scenario, like I say, I can't remember if it was a bat, but I know it wasn't just his hands that he was using. And anyway, so that was towards the last part of the experience, right before she asked me, what area of residence I want to work with, and I was going to pick number 5 because I knew those 2 residents were not going to be unruly, and they were going to be very, very easy to deal with. I didn't want any complicated patients or residents to deal with. So anyway, I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. I'm sure I'm forgetting. See, a lot of times, like, under these experiences, I know that I've actually, I'm actually talking. I know I said some things to her and said some things to him, and she specifically said some things to me, and, but sometimes it's hard to remember little details like that. Totally complete sentences and stuff like that. It's hard to remember, especially if it's not 100% virtual reality and it's like lucid dreaming. But anyway, but like I say, so it's kind of like, sometimes it's kind of like, these aliens, they're not being mean or anything. They're just mocking, what they know what humans are like, They probably think humans are the assholes, you know what I'm saying? They're just mocking that. Because they mocked what I saw in that movie. Not they, but you know what I mean? Him. He mocked what I saw in that movie. The human head bouncing off onto the floor, but it seemed like at that point it became like a doll head. And like I say, there was no, if they put gore and shit like that, if they put really bloody stuff or gore and stuff, then because I've had a few experiences where, it was mean reptilians, because they will put really violent stuff, but that's not very often. The mean ones can't get to me. But, yeah, so that was my experience to the mental retardation facility. That it was a warehouse converted into a mental retardation facility for adults and kids. But like I say, all of the residents were females. Well, thanks for listening.